So, California is a beautiful state, but it's a god awful mess thanks to its leadership, which is almost exclusively made up of Democrats, including California Governor Gavin Newsom and Vice President and wannabe President Kamala Harris. But how did California get this way? How did it get so bad? And is there any way to save it? Well, not if we don't know the root causes, as Kamala would say. So I brought in an expert that's living in the heart of it, someone who did not flee California as I did 4 years ago, Soledad Ursua from Venice, California, and the Neighborhood Council. So I follow you on Twitter, and I've been looking at your reporting and some of the things you've been saying, especially around the homeless encampments and the supposed cleanup that's supposed to happen. California Governor Gavin Newsom said he was waiting for that Supreme Court decision. That's why he's ready to now clean up homeless encampments. How confident are you that this is going to make a difference?
I'm not confident. We've seen that Newsom has promised many actions before and has failed to deliver. He had offered to bring in the National Guard to combat fentanyl dealing in San Francisco. That never happened. So this is one of those issues where he gets to pretend to be moderate, to be tough on crime. He's issued this order, but if you read through the order, it's voluntary. And that's because he's not providing state funding. If he provided state funding, they could go in and clear the encampments. But in his executive order, he cited that the state has already spent $24 billion on homelessness.
Which they can't account for, by the way. A state audit said that they don't really know where that $24 billion went.
The only result of spending this money is that the problem gets worse and that the numbers increase. And so when you look at his order, he is urging and encouraging municipalities to follow suit. So it's all voluntary. But what this really is just a way to sort of clean up the effort. We saw that they can move in encampments. When Chinese President Xi came to town in San Francisco, they quickly cleared the encampments. They also clear them around Super Bowl and for the Oscars. So they can clear them. So if anything, I think this may be an effort to sort of get these encampments out of sight before the voters go to vote in November.
So if it's voluntary, then it's up to city councils to clean them out. And who pays for it then if it's not getting state funding? If an area says, okay, we want to clean up our encampment, we're sick of this, how would they go about doing that using this executive order as, I guess, their validation for it?
Well, unfortunately, it's the taxpayer that always gets stuck with the bill, whether it's state, county, or local government. But what it is just urging municipalities to go ahead and start moving people. There's some cities who've said that it's cruel and unusual punishment. They don't want to necessarily go ahead with it. If you look at San Francisco, Mayor London Breed, who is really at threat of losing her seat during re-election, she is taking it seriously and she's starting to move encampments. But in Los Angeles, with Mayor Karen Bass, she's not really going that direction. And maybe that's because she's not facing re-election in November. So you sort of see it as a way for many of these, socialist-leaning Democrats to use this as an excuse to clear encampments, especially if they're facing re-election. Because voters and taxpayers are getting tired and frustrated with the government, but at the end of the day, they just love to keep squandering our dollars.
Well, they do, and then they have this Housing First initiative, but then they're given all this money to build what they call affordable housing. Number one, it's never affordable, and two, it takes them 5 years to build one unit, and then they celebrate like this was some kind of an achievement because they built one unit, but they squandered millions and millions of dollars. I'm wondering which buddies of the politicians are getting the kickback or the contract to build this affordable housing, because it seems like it takes way too long, it costs way too much, and it doesn't really go to the root of the problem, because a lot of this housing first, we see these individuals that might go into this housing, but if the housing has any rules whatsoever regarding drug use or sexual activity or anything else, then they would rather be on the streets because they can do whatever the hell they want. So when they use this housing first and they try to confuse the rest of America that's not familiar with California, what does that mean to you as somebody who lives there? Does housing first work? And if it does, why is it not working now?
Well, the housing first model it doesn't work. And people have long known this. But going back to affordable housing, it's ironic that we call it affordable when it comes in at $1.1 million per unit. And it's not this huge unit, it's 450 square foot unit. So that's what's being built. And it really is all about money. Today, homelessness is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. And the people that are making big money are, in fact, the real estate developers who are charging the municipalities for affordable housing but also the service providers. These are government contractors. They may be nonprofits, but they're making big money. And for them, they see each homeless individual as a dollar sign. So the more homeless people on the street, the more money that they make. So this is a huge industry. And who benefits from this? Well, the politicians, because these developers and service providers ultimately make campaign contributions to keep these people in office. And so when you really think it, I always talk about follow the money, because if you look at it, the definition of racketeering is to create a problem which otherwise doesn't exist and then profit off it. So homelessness is the greatest racket of all time, and it really all started in California.
Yeah. It's also a little bit easier to be homeless in California than it is other places. I know when I lived there, I'd see individuals who, of course, a lot were down on their luck, but I would often talk to law enforcement officers and I would ask them about the homeless crisis, and I would ask them, who these individuals are, if they know what their background is or they know how they got into the situation. And I was disturbed to hear from a lot of law enforcement officers that because of California's felon coddling policies, a lot of these homeless individuals, not all, but a good chunk, would otherwise be in jail. But if not for California's felon coddling policies, they are back out on the street, and that other states send their homeless to California, or these people come to California because they can get services in California, or at least it's easier to be maybe a registered sex offender on the beaches or the streets of California than it is other places. Is there a fear by residents that live there, especially in Venice, that maybe some of these homeless individuals aren't just pouring down on their luck, but they might actually be a danger to the people that are living in the area?
I think that in Venice, even the most liberal of all my neighbors have now realized that. And that's because Venice really was the epicenter of this homeless disaster starting in 2020. But that's exactly right. And when you look at what's happened, today California has 180,000 homeless individuals. But the state of California, we're only 12% of the US population, but we have 30% of the entire homeless population in California. And so that's a mix of temperate weather. You can sleep outside year round, but also our policies. We have legalized everything. We've legalized crime. We've legalized drug use. You can do heroin and meth and not get arrested. So what's happened is we've really attracted the entire nation's drug addicts who find California as a safe haven for them. And then coupled with some of our progressive policies, such as Prop 47, you can now go out and steal up to $950, and it's just a misdemeanor. So unlike felonies, you cannot stack misdemeanors. So that's why you see people doing smash and grabs every day, and they're stealing to support this drug addiction. And so it's really, we've just, let everything go now. And so people see this. They see that they can take advantage in California. And so residents, especially in the coastal communities, see this because we have, as you said, registered sex offenders living there. Just recently, we've witnessed so many just spiraling attacks on women. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are registered sex offenders who are out of state with long criminal records. So, you keep asking, why are we putting the rights of these violent repeat offenders over everyday citizens? And it's just because of our progressive policies.
It's amazing people keep voting for it. We've talked about Gavin Newsom a lot. He really is taking a lot of credit for his effort to clean up California, whether that's going to happen or not. You and I are very skeptical. But I want to take a listen to Gavin Newsom because he's very convincing when he talks about it. Let's listen to Gavin here.
We made an announcement that we were going to come in, prioritize cleaning up 100 high-profile encampments in the state. We decided to take that goal and stretch it, but it's not enough. This year, just a few weeks ago, I signed a budget that includes $700 million for encampment resolution grants to solve the issue up and down this state. This is unacceptable. People shouldn't live like this.
We significantly increased the contribution to $750 million. I'll remind you, 4 years ago, $0 targeted directly to deal with the issue of encampments. $415 million has already been advanced. $415 million has gone out the door. And as a consequence of that, a little over 13,000 people have been supported in communities all across the state of California. When we leave that discretion to the cities and counties, what's needed in terms of resolving the underlying issue so we can clean up these encampments in the first place.
So Gavin Newsom's pretty convincing, though, when you listen to him. It seems like he's really tackling it, and he says it in such a charismatic way that a lot of people are fooled by it. Do you think that the voters in California tie any of the despair that they feel on a daily basis to the leadership in California, the governor, the senators, the representatives, the state leaders?
I think that people are starting to feel frustrated, but unfortunately, California is just so far blue that people will vote blue no matter who. So unfortunately, California just leans to its progressive ideals. And what we're seeing is that, people have pitched this progressive, paradise, but instead it's just turned into, hell almost for residents, for everyone there. So I hope people do wake up, but unfortunately, Californians are just really deep blue.
It's so odd to me living in California. That's why I left, because I thought maybe there was a chance to save it. I thought that there might be a glimmer of hope, that people were starting to catch on, that they didn't want to live that way. And then I saw the writing on the wall in 2020. And what I thought was shocking is you'd mentioned, and I've mentioned, the felon coddling policies, as I refer to them as. There's more than one. But I thought what was so odd, but so California at the same time, was in 2020 with the mask mandates and when they closed the beaches that my tax dollars went to support and your tax dollars went to support, when they closed that because of COVID, when they sent the Coast Guard out to get the lone paddleboarder in Malibu, that's when they really wanted to crack down on masking and social distancing and the lockdown. Did people in 2020 maybe see the light even a little bit, how ridiculous it feels that you can steal $950 worth and you're considered, maybe a petty thief? But if you go out without a mask, I mean, that was pretty shamed back in 2020.
We had some of the most draconian lockdowns. I think we went through 3 actual lockdowns. For me, it's such a blur. I can't even remember which lockdown we were in over 3 years. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people have left California, mostly the middle class. It's one of the states that lost the largest amount of people. I think we lost some congressional seats. So people are slowly leaving. I think even Elon Musk is leaving. So you see some incredibly rich people. So California is already facing a major budgetary crisis. So we're not sure what will happen. We're losing our tax base. People are leaving. Businesses are leaving. So unfortunately, we may just be left with the homeless.
Right. Well, and to that end, too, talking about maybe some of the dangers that some of these individuals, whether they're homeless or they're offenders, felons that have been released back out on the streets because of the policies in California. Obviously, right now, California is no stranger to wildfires. It's something that happens. A lot of times it's natural, usually blamed upon climate change. That's one of Gavin Newsom's favorite things to talk about, is how climate change is creating all of the state's problems. But we know that this latest fire, this park fire, is actually not caused by climate change at all, but by somebody who has a criminal record, who allegedly pushed a vehicle into a ravine and started this fire. Do people in California, are they outraged by this at all?
And it's no surprise. Everybody has long known that a lot of these fires are homeless fires. The LA Times actually put out a study where they found that more than 50% of all fires in Los Angeles are started by the homeless. It's become such a problem, and it's very embarrassing.
Over 50%.
Yes.
Wait, I want my audience to understand that. Over 50% of the fires in California,
in Los Angeles,
are started by the homeless.
And it's gotten so embarrassing for local elected officials that they started changing the names. It's no longer a homeless fire, it's a debris fire, a trash fire. And so trash is not something that just blows up. That would be very scary. Then I would really believe in climate change if trash was just blowing up. But no, somebody had to light the trash. I've also heard them call them tree fires because the homeless will set trees on fire. So they've started changing names to sort of hide the problem.
Yeah. Well, the homeless encampments in California are not like anywhere else. I mean, maybe Portland. Portland has an issue. Seattle also has an issue. Other areas that do. But I've never seen it like I saw it in LA. And I think San Francisco might be even worse. But in LA, I mean, it extends all the way down. But these homeless encampments, I recently went back, and I used to love California, not so much anymore. But I was in like the Woodland Hills area, and I was looking at some of these encampments on the sidewalk. I mean, they're on the sidewalk. And these are not just, okay, they've got a homeless person laying on the side of the sidewalk with a sleeping bag. No. These are elaborate. These are elaborate to the point where they've got shopping carts, they've got toys, they've got, ping pong tables. For people who are unfamiliar with California, haven't visited recently, haven't seen these encampments, which in some cases span miles, what can you tell them about what they might see?
It's just, and it's everywhere too. It's not just in one area. Every neighborhood is seeing these encampments, but it's very dangerous. And that's because inside some of the tents, there can be weapons, there's drugs, there's people who are passed out, there's needles, there's human feces. So these are major public health hazards, and yet public health officials will just look away. We've seen people who have built 2-story structures. So California is one of the most regulated and taxed areas. I don't even think I can change my siting without going through planning review, but yet they're allowing people to build 2-story structures, which are dangerous. They could collapse and kill someone. They could kill onlookers. But what you see is just sort of these centers or neighborhoods where this lawlessness is just, let fester. And there's so much violence. There's homeless on homeless violence. Mm-hmm. Much of it is because of drugs. There's homeless people who will set each other's tents or RVs on fire. There's drug dealers who will harm individuals who don't have the money to pay for their drugs. There's sex work going on. So you just see these epicenters where we know that the crime is going on, especially the people who are unfortunate to live around it and see it with their own eyes. And yet, officials just sort of give them a pass and say, there's nothing we can do. We have to be more compassionate. But I think what you're going to see in California is sort of compassion fatigue. People are getting tired of it. You showed those videos of Gavin Newsom. The first one was back in 2022. It seems that every year for the past decade, he said that homelessness is his number one concern and he's going to solve it. And I do hope that voters remember this, that every year it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought up some of the homeless on homeless violence, because that's something when I went back to California, I heard a lot of people talk about. But Venice is not a cheap place to live. Santa Monica, not a cheap place to live. You live in Venice. You have neighbors that are paying a lot of money to live there, and their incomes are being taxed to high heaven. I mean, California is one of the most expensive places in the world to live. When you talk to your neighbors or the people that live in Venice who might vote blue or might consider themselves liberal or Democrat, why do they stay? Do they enjoy this atmosphere, or are they getting fed up too? Are they leaving? Why haven't you left?
Well, the reason that I'm there is because all of my family's in California. So I don't know if I could take everyone with me. So I think a lot of the people who have left, they do have family there. So it's hard to leave. I think we're hoping that Venice will turn around, that some of these areas will turn around. But I am starting to think about leaving because it just gets worse and worse. So I think the people that are, have stayed, maybe they own real estate or maybe they have family there. So it's one of those things that people are hoping for change, but it does seem unlikely.
Homelessness in Venice is not a new thing. Homelessness in Venice has almost been a cultural thing dating back decades, where it was kind of part of the culture to be homeless. And I talked to homeless individuals when I was there, interviewed them, and they said that this homelessness is not like the homelessness that Venice used to have, the hippies, the artists. This is different. This is a darker shade of homelessness, to where it's gotten violent, as you said, but to where it's got unsafe for homeless people. If you were to divide, the violent homeless people from the people that are just down on their luck, to the homeless veterans, to the people that do have mental health issues. That's something that Gavin Newsom also talks about a lot, which is the mental health. A lot of these people are not stable. What do you think the solution is? Is there any solution to getting these people the help they need, if they would even want it?
Well, right now we're treating it as a housing crisis. It has nothing to do with housing. So the only way to really solve this is to treat it as the drug addiction and mental illness crisis that it is. And that means getting people sober. We cannot allow people to do drugs and to live on the streets. That's not the compassionate route. And when you look at just the change of what's happened, I moved to Venice in 2016. I guess there were homeless, but it's not like what is today. And that's because of the drugs. We've had hard drugs coming in, especially fentanyl, meth and heroin. And so you just see it's just a completely different sort of landscape today. And look, I used to be more liberal. I'm originally from California. I spent 10 years in New York. I would consider myself more of a libertarian, where I believe that we should legalize drugs and even some prostitution. But living in Venice really changed my mind, because I saw people on these hard drugs. And when you're on these drugs like fentanyl or these synthetic meths, people don't have free will. So, and when they come off of the drugs, it is so violent that you actually can't get off of it. You could die from, not having those drugs in your system. So it's sort of woken me up that these drugs are a serious problem. And unfortunately, as long as we have an open border where synthetic drugs are coming through, Chinese cartels or Mexican cartels, this is really the problem that's going on, that America is becoming addicted to these violent drugs that you have no chance getting off of. So that's really what we're seeing today is, you would need people to be hospitalized to get off of these drugs.
Right. Is California savable, in your opinion, in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think that there will be a shift, or is this going to continue or get worse?
I think it is savable, especially I've met some people who were living on the street previously. People can get sober, they can reform their lives, but it's really just getting people off of drugs, and that takes some sort of intervention. Many of the people that I've met who've turned their life around, this happened before Prop 47, because ironically, going to jail is one way that they stopped using drugs.
Okay, I want to bring that up because one of the things that a lot of the Democrat leaders, including I believe Gavin Newsom, have talked about is that they're not going to lock people out of this problem, that you can't criminalize addiction. Because that's something that's not compassionate to criminalize addiction. Just locking somebody up with psychological or drug problems isn't going to fix them or cure them. But what you're telling me is that a lot of these people, when they do go to jail, that's their first experience with having to get sober, and that might actually save their life.
Even Robert Downey Jr. has cited going to jail as sort of the intervention that he needed to get sober. And most of the people that I've met, that was really the intervention that they needed. Because what's sad today is that, you see people on the street and they will overdose, they will go to the hospital, but they're right back out on the streets. Even the people that get permanent supportive housing, they go into housing and they come right back out onto the streets. And so without any serious intervention, they will stay on the streets until they die. So by taking and removing the jail aspect, there really is no last solution. Some of these people don't have family members to pay for really expensive, hospital stays or just, the medication needed to get sober. So for many, it really is jail that gets them sober.
Yeah. And it's also unfair for those that are not homeless or not drug addicted. It's really unfair. And I know people don't like to talk about this, but I talk about it often. It's not fair for the people in California who want to live and work and raise a family and be decent human beings that they have to deal with this problem each and every single day, that they can't take their kids to Venice Beach because they're worried that they might step on a needle, or they're worried that the homeless people might attack them. I mean, it's unfair that women can't go running on the Strand without fear of maybe being accosted by a homeless person. It's just unfair that decent people get no say in California. It doesn't feel like, unless you're incredibly wealthy and you live behind a gate somewhere in Calabasas or in the Hollywood Hills or in Beverly Hills. For the average person out there, they're paying way too much to live and work there. They're being sucked dry of their tax dollars, and then they have to worry about their safety on a daily basis. I don't know. That to me seems like a good reason to leave California.
Mm-hmm. And, it's funny that so many of these Democrats talk about equity, but their policies are incredibly regressive, because we're living in a time now where you have to have private security. If you call the police, you could be on hold for an hour. So people have just stopped reporting crime. And that's why you see some of the trends showing that crime is down. Crime is not down. It's reported crime that is down. So people have just sort of lost faith in the system. And so many people feel like they're on their own. People are resorting to private security. As you said, if you live in a gated community, you're much safer than any other neighborhood.
But even those communities are not really safe anymore because they're being targeted and burglarized, maybe just burglarized, but still, a lot of celebrities have fallen victim to that. But I'm glad you brought that up, because Gavin likes to tweet a lot about how the red states actually have more crime and how crime is going down in his state. Important to note that you're right, people are just not reporting crime because, if you get your car broken into in Los Angeles and you call the police, good luck. They're probably going to laugh at you like, we've got some bigger problems to worry about here. It's definitely a different ballgame in California, but it's really easy to shape the narrative when you don't live there or you've never lived there. So I think it's important not to let the leaders off the hook, because at the end of the day, the tax dollars are flowing in. It's not a money problem. Lots of money going in, not so much of it doing much of anything. But we appreciate you for coming and telling the truth and for trying to fight the good fight, trying to save California. Thanks so much for all you do. Where can people follow you to get updated on what's going on?
Follow me on Twitter, Soledad Ursua. And so I'm always out there sort of documenting the homeless crisis in California.
Well, stay safe. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is our special episode on the hellscape that is California. God bless everyone that's still staying there and trying to fight the good fight. And I will see you again live Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Until then, from the great state of Tennessee, God bless. Take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.